Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Welcome to today's discussion on the South Sudanese Women Intellectuals Forum. My name is Dr. Anne Lomole. I am a pediatrician and an infectious disease consultant, and I will be your moderator today. Thank you, panelists, for joining us. Today, we will be discussing the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. The 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence is an annual international campaign that kicks off on the 25th of November, the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, and runs until the 10th of December, which is Human Rights Day. It was started by activists at the inaugural Women's Global Leadership Institute in 1991 and continues to be coordinated each year by the Center for Women's Global Leadership. It is used as an organizing strategy by individuals and organizations around the world to call for prevention and elimination of violence against women and girls. In support of this civil society initiative, under the leadership of the UN Secretary General, the United Nations Secretary General's Unite by 2030 to End Violence Against Women campaign, the Unite campaign, calls for global action to increase awareness, galvanize advocacy efforts, and share knowledge and innovations. The 2020 global theme for the 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence is To Orange the World, Fund, Respond, Prevent, and Collect. Violence against women has gained international recognition as a serious social development and human rights concern, and considerable evidence shows the need to address sexual gender-based violence in countries emerging from conflict, like South Sudan. International women rights instruments, such as the Convention of the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, the Women's Convention in 1979, the Declaration on the Elimination of Violence Against Women in 1993, the Declaration of the Fourth World Conference on Women in Beijing 1995, and the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 expressly condemn all forms of gender-based violence and calls on all parties to armed conflict to take special measures to protect women and girls from gender-based violence, particularly rape and other forms of sexual abuse. Gender-based violence is an umbrella term for any harmful act that is perpetrated against a person's will and that is based on a socially ascribed gender, differences between males and females. The increase in violence against women must be dealt with urgently, with measures embedded in economic support and stimulus packages that meet the gravity and scale of the challenge and reflect the needs of the women who face multiple forms of discrimination. Grassroots and women's organizations and communities have played a critical role in preventing and responding to previous crises and need to be supported strongly in their current frontline role. Police and justice services must also mobilize to ensure that incidents of violence against women and girls are given high priority with no impunity for the perpetrators. The private sector also has an important role to play. Children should not be left out of this discussion as gender-based violence affects them both directly and indirectly. Gender-based violence can have a severe impact on the physical health, growth, and development of children. The psychological impact of abuse or witnessing abuse can adversely affect mental health and well-being. Children living in abusive environments or who have witnessed abuse also have a higher risk of developing behavioral, emotional, cognitive problems. And they can also experience direct abuse, and they are therefore at greatest risk because of their vulnerability and because of their dependence on the adults around them. Today, we remember all the women and children who have fallen victim to gender-based violence. I would especially want to take this moment to mention one of our gender activists, the late Anida Monane Magaya, who fought for the rights of women and whose life was cut short when she was killed by her husband. Late Anida Monane Magaya, we will never forget you, and we will continue to fight for justice for all the South Sudanese women and children. We also remember the many women and children who have lost their lives to acts of violence. It is imperative that we create awareness on these issues and find solutions to eliminate violence against the most vulnerable in society. At this time, I would like us to take a moment of silence to remember all those who have been victims of violence. Thank you so much, everyone, for putting all the lives lost in remembrance. I would like to welcome our panel of experts who will be speaking on different aspects of gender-based violence. We will focus on the importance of male champions and male involvement, the legal aspects, and the situation in South Sudan and the diaspora. Our panelists will also discuss the challenges and give recommendations. I would like to thank the audience today for joining us. Please do not hesitate to ask any questions, and we will try to answer as many as we can. And please feel free to share the link to this discussion on all your social media platforms. I would also like to thank the UN Women for their support, and Aisha and Robert for technical support behind the scenes, and our panelists for taking their time to be part of this discussion today. I will go straight into introducing our esteemed panelists. First, I would like to welcome Honorable Pierre Philip, and I will give a brief biography for every panelist. So Honorable Pierre Philip, welcome to the panel today. Thank you for being the representative of the males on this discussion. Honorable Pierre Philip is a University of Bristol Graduate School trained basic services policy expert with over 17 years of extensive professional experience in South Sudan. He holds a master's degree in education leadership, policy and development from the University of Bristol. He also has a Bachelor of Arts degree in education from Makerere University in Uganda, a certificate in gender education and conflict from the University of Ulster in Northern Ireland, and is currently pursuing an MBA from the Open University in UK. He has worked with the USAID, the Norwegian Church Aid, and the government of Western Equatoria in various capacities. He was the Minister of Education in Western Equatoria from 2012 to 2020 and is one of the longest serving state ministers in South Sudan. He also initiated and championed the Partnership for Recovery and Resilience program, which supported vulnerable communities to recover from the shocks of war and violent conflict in South Sudan. He has worked with the National Ministry of General Education as the chair of Global Partnership for Education, a $17 million infrastructure program that has successfully constructed 25 primary schools across the Republic of South Sudan. He's currently based at the Center of Humanitarian Dialogue and was seconded to the South Sudan NGO Forum Secretariat in Juba to serve as a risk and compliance manager. Welcome, Honorable Pierre Philip. Next, I would like to welcome Dr. Jen Abucha, who is currently not on screen but will be joining us in a minute. Dr. Jen Abucha is a professor of nursing and a clinical and classroom instructor for the Carrington College of Nursing Associate Degree Program. She earned a degree in 1988 as a nurse practitioner, and prior to moving to the United States, a degree in medicine. She has a bachelor's degree in nursing science and a master's degree of science and nursing with a specialty in acute care as a nurse practitioner from the Grand Canyon University. She currently holds a doctorate in nursing practice. Next, I would like to introduce Maulana Nyagua Tut. Nyagua is an international human rights lawyer, currently working as a researcher with the Human Rights Watch, and prior to her current role, she worked with Amnesty International as a campaigner on Sudan and South Sudan, and with the South Sudan Law Society as an advocacy officer. She holds a master's degree in law from Harvard University and a bachelor's degree in law from the University of Nairobi. Welcome, Maulana. Next, I would like to introduce Dr. Idiora. Dr. Idiora is a practicing obstetrician and gynecologist at the Mater Hospital in Nairobi. She has a bachelor's degree in medicine and surgery from the University of Juba and a master's degree in obstetrics and gynecology from the University of Nairobi. She's currently pursuing a fellowship in gynecological oncology at the University of Nairobi. Welcome, Dr. Idiora. Next, I would like to introduce Ms. Editha Legi Meling, who is the Executive Director of the the Women Empowerment and Rehabilitation Organization, NWERO, which is a women-led organization in South Sudan that aims to empower the society on peace building, economic empowerment, and supports GBV survivors. Some of the programs that they have undertaken include needs assessments to identify the level of information, availability, and access to prevention, treatment, care, and support for those who have experienced sexual, gender-based violence, and girls who have been affected by domestic violence, early pregnancies, and forced marriage. They have also assessed the COVID-19 preventative measures among adolescent girls and young women in Juba, Central Equatoria State in South Sudan. Thank you so much, our panelists, for joining us today, and welcome to the discussion. I'll go straight into the questions for the panelists. We will start with Honorable Pierre Philip. Welcome, Honorable, and thank you for representing the men on this panel today. We know that the discussion and the strategies to end gender-based violence can only succeed when men are also included. We would like you to set the stage by telling us, what is your understanding of gender-based violence? What are the forms of gender-based violence? And what are the contributing factors to gender-based violence among South Sudanese? Thank you and welcome, Honorable Pierre.
Thank you, Dr. Ann, and thank you, everyone on this call this afternoon in Juba. Actually, this afternoon in Juba. I'm honored and privileged to be part of this panel today and share ideas on some of the things we have done in South Sudan, especially in Western Equatoria region. Gender-based violence is, my understanding of gender-based violence is that those activities that are taken to prevent the interests or the success of one another based on their gender. And they could be political, they could be economic, they could be social, and name them, that actually are preventable, that people try to prevent one another from accessing based on their gender, because you're a man, because you're a woman, so you are not supposed to participate in those particular things. For example, in education, women are prevented, and based on the cultures that we have come from. So that's my understanding of gender-based violence.
Thank you so much, Honorable Pierre. Could you please just tell us what the forms of gender-based violence are and what might be the contributing factors from your experience to gender-based violence among South Sudanese?
Yeah, good. One of the most popular gender-based violence practice in our community is actually violence by men against women, or prevention of access to economic or political opportunities by men against women. And one of the contributing factors to the violence in homes that we have realized in our community is, first of all, it is from a cultural background. Where we come from, South Sudanese, we have come from that background where women were seen as second class. And unfortunately, even in our communities today, even if we are educated, we still practice these things, where women are seen like they don't matter at all. They should not ask any question. And when you trace this, it is more to culture and customs. Some communities in South Sudan do not look at women as people who can sit around the table and talk. Even if those communities, those parents are educated, one of the very sad situation that happened, I think it was last year in one of the states, was a girl was beaten to death by her brothers just because she refused to marry that man, so that the brother could get the cattle and marry a wife. And I heard also a very sad story in one of the community that the girl was actually slaughtered, killed, because there was a man who came and asked for this girl, and they had an agreement with the parent to marry the girl off. And the parent found the girl pregnant to other boy in the school. So the man decided to slaughter the guy in the same region. So one of the things actually is culture and custom that some of us, even if we have gone to school in South Sudan, we still believe in that. And we have not done the work of transforming our communities. One face of us is of the 21st century, but another face that we always keep in at our homes is those ones of the 18th century in 21st century. Culture is something that we need to work against. And the other factor is poverty. In Western Equatoria, one of the reasons that we found to be fueling gender-based violence is poverty, because when a man is not able to provide services at home, it creates some level of tension at home that leads to fighting. And because the man cannot provide, there is no peace at home, and the man doesn't want to accept to swallow the bitter pill to tell his wife that, look, today I have no money. I cannot buy for you the things you need. I cannot provide. I cannot put the food on the table. This leads to violence, and the woman can be beaten. And also, poverty leads to some opportunities. People will try to look for opportunity. Women will try to go out. Some men don't want their wives to work. They don't want them to go and sell some vegetables in the market. So poverty leads to that. And the communities where we had engagement trying to empower women, we saw a different story. The other thing that really causes this is how we bring up our children. I can be training my daughter to be a good, responsible wife when the time comes for her to marry, with the education, with the better part of my culture. But you might not be training your boy what it means to be a husband. Because a boy is left at large, it is up to him. He goes to play football, he goes to dance, he comes back, and the parents are there seeing. But that bringing the boy to be a husband is some portion of our community is left at large. You can train a girl to cook, but you don't train the boy to be a husband, to be a man who manages a home. And this is how it has been from custom and culture. And so people feel it has to go this way. So these are some of the factors that I believe in terms of social and custom and culture, there are things which are entrenched. And again, where the community, people like me, like you, who have come to see the light of the day, we are not doing a good job in engaging our communities. If you see where these issues are happening, there is somebody there who would have transformed the community. Sometime, one thing I learned in Yambio, one day I called a big meeting. I said, all the women, you come with your husbands. We have a conversation. I asked all the men to be patient, and I told the wives to tell me exactly in a big room, a big hall, what the men are doing to them. And we agreed that when they go back home, no man should beat the wife. If they beat you, wife, come to the minister and we will apprehend that man. So I asked the men, after the women gave all the reasons why they are beaten. Yes, my husband there, he beat me for this, for this, for this. I asked the men, why do you beat your wife? They said, she's my wife. I have to beat her. My mother was also beaten. So I realized that there is no honest conversation. So people think that in the village, because this is how it has been, because a woman can just be married. If she's pregnant, she's left there until she delivers. So a woman can be inherited because the woman is married with many cows for the whole family. She has no choice to say, no, this is not the husband I married. Because, marriage should be from the heart. You cannot just give me a wife. Probably I didn't like that wife. I have to love her from my heart. So that custom and culture that we are growing with, I believe, is something that, and then we need to stand up for these things. But in some communities, if a woman talks, you are a spoiled woman. But up to when will women accept to be spoiled women and not taking up the child? Who is going to plant that seed of change if everybody fraternize with that?
You're very right, Honorable Pierre Philip. I like the way you've put it. I think what I can gather from what you have discussed right now is that our culture and our upbringing has a very, very big contribution to propagating gender-based violence, because as you have mentioned, that the people who are asked why they are beating their wives, they would say, but she's my wife, I'm allowed to beat her, because their culture has actually told them that it's okay. And they also say that my mother was beaten. So they saw it growing up, and they have decided that this is acceptable, and therefore they have allowed it to continue. Thank you for giving us that brief overview based on your experience and what you have seen in Western Equatoria State and in South Sudan in general. Our next question will go to Dr. Idiora. Dr. Idiora, you'll be giving us a few notes on the medical perspective of this issue. And maybe to set the stage for that, could you please give us a brief overview of what the relationship between gender-based violence and health is, and how does violence and unhealthy relationships in homes or communities affect women's reproductive health? So two questions that are very related to each other: the relationship between gender-based violence and health, and how violence and unhealthy relationships affect women's reproductive health. Thank you, Dr. Idiora.
Thank you for hosting me, Dr. Ann. Relationship between gender-based violence and health. First of all, when we come to definition of gender-based violence, it refers to harmful acts that are directed towards an individual. And in this case, we are talking about the gender, which is the lower gender, which is the female. So actually, after violence, you develop some healthy issues, because again, on the other side, health is defined as a complete state of physical, mental, and social well-being. So if you are being tortured on the other side, definitely you will not have this physical. First of all, you are hurt everywhere. You might be having injuries. This is physical. You are physically unwell. Mentally, you are frustrated. Again, you are not mentally well. And socially, when you experience some sort of violence, you become withdrawn from the society. You will not even have the chance of going and chat with others. So you begin to isolate yourself. So actually, again, socially, you become sick. So I think this can be the relationship between gender-based violence and health. So when we come to unhealthy relationship, if you always beat me, honestly, there is no relationship there. That is what I can say. Because if I'm not happy with you, definitely the relationship is not good. Now, if the relationship is not good between me and my husband in my house, again, that one will be reflected on the children. I will be violent towards the children, because now we are going like a hierarchy. See, the man is superior to me and I'm superior to the kids. So what do you expect? I think I will just inflict injuries again to my children. And children who are brought up in a violent situation, now when they see violence in the house, they go to play outside. They also inflict on their inferior friends who are outside there. So I think the whole community is not healthy at the end of it if there is any experience of violence. Again, with the effect of this violence on the reproductive health, because now when you don't have any rights, you will have no rights on your reproductive choices. So we end up getting unwanted pregnancies. When I have an unwanted pregnancy, and if somebody encourages me to carry the pregnancy to term, that baby will be the source of my unhappiness throughout my life. And you know, a child that I've brought that way, even if that child grows up, that child will still have violence in his mind. Like Honorable has just said, that my mother was being beaten. I think it is not only in South Sudan, because there was a time I attended a program whereby the psychologist said, if you want to marry a man, you see how the father is. So what the man will be will reflect what the father was doing, because they will actually inherit from their fathers. This is what my father used to do, so I have to do it. So again, at the end of the day, we will not have a healthy community, and women reproductive health will be affected. Again, when you are forced, you are raped, you will end up getting sexual transmitted infections, STIs. If you get the ones which can be treated, it's okay. Maybe you get treatment. If you get HIV, the whole of your life, you're not happy. So the frustration continues, and it affects the whole community at the end of the day. Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anne.
Thank you so much. I think you've clearly shown us that health includes a number of aspects, whether it's the emotional aspect, the mental aspect, the physical aspect, the social aspect, and gender-based violence affects all that. I'm not sure whether I'm still if I'm still being heard. So gender-based violence affects all that. And you have also talked about the trickle effect, in the sense that sometimes you find that it trickles down. If the husband is abusing the wife abuses the children abuse the other children. Okay, I will just, sorry, I'm not sure whether anyone was hearing me when I was speaking. Was I still on? I was, okay, fine. I had a bit of a freeze there. So what I was saying is that the trickle effect is what I think most people don't take into account, the fact that violence against women can trickle to almost everyone in the society, from the husband to the woman, from the woman to her children, from her children to their playmates. And I think that trickle effect is what we have not been able to look into. It's important that you mentioned that. And the fact that when a woman experiences violence, then there's a tendency that she's also denied her rights, especially her reproductive health rights. And this leads to further issues. So thank you so much, Dr. Idiora, for that. Sorry that I disappeared for a few seconds there. So the next questions will go to Maulana Nyagua. The UN Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, adopted in 1979, called on the states to take in all fields appropriate measures, including legislation, to ensure the full development and advancement of women, for the purpose of guaranteeing them the exercise and enjoyment of human rights and fundamental freedoms, which is what Dr. Idiora has also indicated, and on the basis of equality with men. The convention further calls on states to modify or abolish existing laws, regulation, customs, and practices which constitute discrimination against women. But it was not until the women's human rights community organized around the issue of violence against women that the international community took note and began to understand that violence against women seriously impairs their enjoyment of their human rights and fundamental freedoms. It's important to note that women's rights are also human rights. So the first question for you, Maulana, is what are the broad range of issues linked to gender-based violence that the women and girls in South Sudan are facing? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ann. I think that's a very appropriate introduction to this question. Now, the issues in South Sudan, we have to look at first, not only what is happening on the ground, but what exists in law and in both law and practice. Now, in South Sudan, you have a plural legal system where you have customary law and statutory law. But in practice, the issues that women and girls face in South Sudan is not only the day-to-day acts of physical, emotional, as well as sexual violence, but also a broad range of unexplored issues due to customary law. So you have cases of rape, gang rape, sexual violence, sexual mutilation. And you also have other acts of violence, including the lack of allowing women to inherit matrimonial property. You have also the crimes that have been committed in the context of conflicts in South Sudan. So issues around conflict-related sexual violence. So we not only have to look at the acts that are taking place or the instances where it is towards the physical person of the individual, but also the emotional as well as the financial. We have to look at this in a very broad manner, not just limiting ourselves to physical acts themselves.
So basically, what you have mentioned is a little bit to do with what Honorable Pia and Dr. Idiora had talked about a bit, about the cultural and the customary law, which is related to the cultural aspects that contribute to the perpetuation of gender-based violence against women and girls. And I think that overview is quite important, and it's important to understand that it's not only the physical act of violence, but also the other factors that are affected, the emotional part, the social part that is affected, and the fact that the law has to find a way to actually protect women and girls and basically vulnerable people in the society from these acts of violence. Thank you very much, Maulana, for that. Now, next, I would like to go to Dr. Jane. Dr. Jane, are you there? I can't seem to find you on video. So yes, Dr. Jen Abucha. Thank you so much. Thank you for taking your time, Dr. Jane, to be with us, despite having a hectic work schedule. I can see you're still gowned there. Thank you so much for contributing to preventing and treating patients that have been affected by COVID-19. Now, if you can hear me, I'd like to ask you your first question. Do the South Sudanese in the diaspora encounter incidences of gender-based violence? And kindly take us through what is happening in the diaspora in relation to violence against women and children. So Dr. Jane is currently representing the voice of the diaspora in this discussion. However, she's currently at work. I hope she can hear me. Dr. Jane? If you can unmute yourself, please. Dr. Jane, you're still muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, my voice may not be so good, but thank you for allowing me to get in my 2 cents in here. I was super busy, but I'm grateful for all of you. Diaspora has a lot of gender-based violence, and especially during hard times, we have seen gender-based violence in different levels. We have seen women that are married to South Sudanese that have been targeted, women that have been married to other tribes outside South Sudan have been targeted. We have seen girls being targeted by their peers who are from different ethnicities. And we have seen women being targeted in their own homes, in their own marriages. And apart from that, there is gender-based violence that is seen among the South Sudanese transgender. In case you think there's no transgender within South Sudan, there is transgender, and they are also experiencing gender-based violence. And it's as painful as it is, it does happen, and it's there, it exists.
Thank you, Dr. Jane. Are you able to give us maybe some of the factors that might be contributing to gender-based violence in the diaspora? If you could just enlighten us, or what do you think is contributing to gender-based violence in the diaspora?
So, number one is that we do have a lot of issues that are not addressed, like other countries that have already moved ahead with civilization. They have specific ways of addressing their problems. For example, if in South Sudan there is a problem in the family, counseling cannot be done because the men don't go for counseling. But they yet do assert that there is gender-specific roles in the home. So the woman has to go to work, come back and cook, go pick up the kids from school, drop another one at basketball, drop another one at something else. If you cannot handle your gender assigned role by him, you are subject to violence. And because a lot of people, and especially our own South Sudanese men, if anything happens in a marriage and arises, America, America. So these women are trying to be quiet so that they avoid this problem. This word, Al Galida America, San Ahal Tomanenak. We have had a woman here that her family has been beaten in Juba because of what has happened here. We have several families that their families have been destroyed and distorted in Africa because of the gender violence that have been taking place here. So there are many, many, many of them, and it's very, very unfortunate. And I can attest to you that we have sat down and talked in Phoenix, Arizona, in several of those cases, and we couldn't sort them out. And the law has to intervene. And when it comes to the law, it is not so good. We have more than 7 women, South Sudanese women, sitting in the government houses whereby their husbands are not allowed to reach there due to that.
Oh, that's
only
a
domestic
very
violence, it is because that woman is a woman. She is a woman and she's useless and she cannot carry her duty as a woman.
That's quite unfortunate. The fact that gender roles are being used as a basis to for women to experience violence, and that now they cannot stay in their homes because of the fear of actually being hurt or even being killed. It's a very sad situation, and I hope that when we come to discussing some of the recommendations that each and every panelist has, we will be able to sort of come up with possible solutions for how we can circumvent this issue and find a way to keep these women safe and keep them in a place where they are protected from their attackers. Now, our next question will go to Miss Editha Meling. Thank you for joining us. I think the most common issue that we have noted here from all the panelists is that our culture is a very huge contributing factor to propagating gender-based violence in South Sudan. So from your experience, Ms. Editha, now that you have been able to interact with people who have survived gender-based violence and you've been able to support these individuals, how does culture influence gender-based violence in South Sudan? And I will combine it with your next question. Why do you think that very few women report cases of gender-based violence in South Sudan? And what can be done to encourage them to report before some severe consequences occur? Ms. Editha Meling.
Thank you so much for being in this panel and for having this opportunity to discuss the issue of GVV in South Sudan. Culture influence GVV through the practice that disregard women as an equal partner. Our men think that women are both They were paying dowry, and it is his own. And he's not have a say in the family. And consider her like less capacity. The woman doesn't have the capacity to do the work, and the woman has not capability to do the work. And why do we, very few women reported cases of gender-based violence is that the culture of the same around rape, in particularly in the severe, that many women fear to report the crime for, because sometimes they think that if they report the case of rape, then she will be forced to that rapist to marry her. The second thing is that women fear to report in GBV cases in South Sudan due to the judges that the women get from the services providers. Like in the police stations, when women report, women face a lot of issues, because when they are to report the case, then many questions comes. Why this happened? If it is a rape, why you go out at night? What this and happen? You go and solve this in your home. So women fear to go and report because of these issues in the police stations. The other thing is that culture also affect women reporting GBV cases, because they think that if they report, then now especially when she is raped, then the woman say, I'm raped, what next? Why for me to go and report? If I report, who is helping me? And even the information of where the service providers are is not there in the community. Some of the community, they don't know where to report and when. That is the challenges that facing women in South Sudan. The other thing is that inadequate services of the GBV in other locations. We have only the service providers in the main hospital, and in the community there is no services providers for people who are raped or those who are in GBV. Recently, in one of the locations that we carried out the awareness, one of the women was beaten by the husband, and then she ran to the police for protection. When the husband came and said, this is my wife, I pay dowry, and she's my wife. Then the police say, you go home and solve the issues within your family. Now, after they went back to their home, the man beat that woman until she died. She killed the woman, because those of police, they did not even rescue her. So this is the issues that facing women in South Sudan. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Editha. I think you have actually mentioned quite a number of very valid points. And I think the thing that's coming out very clearly is that culture is a big issue that we have to deal with when it comes to gender-based violence, especially the thinking that once you have paid dowry for a woman, she becomes your property, and therefore you have rights over her, and she basically loses her human rights. And that is a discussion that we need to go into. I like the way you have mentioned that service providers actually contribute very, very greatly to whether a woman will report a gender-based violence or not. Because if you go to the doctor and the doctor does not believe you, or you go to the police and the police do not believe you, or even if they do, they call you a perpetrator, they hear his side of the story, they don't necessarily look to confirm whether what you're saying is true, and send you back to the same person who perpetrated the violence. And then those women then end up either killed or even worse off than they were before they reported. And this is something that we will discuss, especially when it comes to the law and the people who are supposed to be custodians of the law. And when we come to healthcare providers, Dr. Idiora will also give us a brief overview of what role can we play in those specific aspects of our work to ensure that women are actually encouraged to go and report these acts of violence, and even as they report, that they are protected from further violence. We will go back to you, Honorable Pierre Philip, and what wanted to ask you next is if you can just add more on what Ms. Editha said about why both men and women are not reporting cases of gender-based violence to law enforcement, and what can be done to encourage the community to take gender-based violence as a criminal act. Maybe you can add on to what Ms. Editha Meling said and give us a few pointers on how the community can actually be encouraged to take GBV as a criminal act.
Okay, good. Thank you, Dr. Ann. I think Edis has mentioned very important point. I think one of the things is stigma. A man doesn't want to go out there crying. By the way, I had a conversation with men in Yambio, and they told me how they suffer from women. But some of them don't even eat. Others, you leave home and then you go and they try to sleep elsewhere, or your clothes, you don't get the support you need at home. Some women also really have violence against men. But because of our assumed superiority complex, that we don't want to be seen as a weaker gender, so men are dying actually in dignified silence. It does happen. Men don't want to show this out. I mean, to show that yesterday my wife beat me and I could not sleep. It's an embarrassment. That's one of the reasons. Actually, that is keeping men not to come up. From among women, there are two issues I always see. One is the repercussion of taking this out. Maybe it could lead to divorce. The man will say, "Why have you reported me to your parents? So I take you out." And this always happens in communities where the woman is really dependent on a man, because her source of livelihood is the man. She has never been to school. She did not have the opportunities. She's not working, and she was given. And especially in pastoralist community where people ask for so many cows, and it's like, if you dare come home, we are not going to pay those cows because your brother used the cows to marry a wife. So you are gone, and you are gone, amen. So in such a way, the woman would feel like, you don't want really to open the Pandora box. That will bring the whole chaos to the family. So she will die in a dignified silence, which is really very sad. I think there are also the issues of law enforcement agents, and also the privacy. In Yambio, we try to create the referral pathway. If you are beaten in the village, where do you go? And how do you go? Also in the police, we worked with partners and created, there is a room with a bed. If a woman is beaten and you have a kid, you can go to the police. There is a center where you can sleep with your children. There are female police whom we train who can come and attend to your case. If you are raped, we created a pathway. You can get a border. You get to the Yambio Teaching Hospital. The border should be able to be given a refund within 24 hours so that you can get some medication. So the law enforcement, our law enforcement is still trying to catch up with these issues, that they too much lean towards their customs and traditions. Even if when they have the books, in front of them, they don't abide by that. So I think these are the issues that really still keep women. And why they don't treat these issues as a criminal issue, I think we have not had enough conversation with our communities. One mistake we are doing is we take these things to be a common knowledge. This is my experience. We take these things because we have read them in books, we are exposed. We think people in the village think like us. We have not taken the conversation to the communities. Even about issues of education for the girls. We tried in Western Equatoria and it is working. But our mistake always is we assume that the community thinks the way we think because we have gone to school. But you need to use the traditional ways of communication of our people. You need to bring a new knowledge from known to unknown. Sit down with them who are in this community, sit down with them and give them what are the challenges with this GBV in your community. What is the alternative if your wife has done wrong? They have no alternative because we have not. So they don't take it as a criminal thing because they even don't know whether what they're doing is wrong. Secondly, in our towns, we are not doing enough of awareness at lower level. Really engage the awareness. It's not about 1 week workshop. It's about a consistent engagement, because anything that is tied to culture and custom is not a workshop thing. It is a consistent engagement to change the mindset, to transform the community. And most of our partners do this in big towns. So you want to do it around Juba, and you want to do it in Wow, you want to do it in Yambio. You don't want to do it at the periphery where the real community is. And with that, then, it is not a case. It's not a criminal case. But if you sit down with this community, give them the pros and cons of GBV, I'm sure they are not stones. They are not stones, but we have not given them the opportunity to understand the differences between what we are seeing and what they are seeing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable. I think that is something that has now come up, what you have discussed about awareness of what the ills of GBV is. The fact that people are so used to seeing this happen that they don't even think about it. They don't think it's wrong. They don't think it's criminal. And the fact that they lack this knowledge, then this also allows the behavior to continue. And if we're concentrating our efforts in the towns where people already have the knowledge and not taking it deep into the communities where they need that knowledge, then we are actually failing our people and failing ourselves. And I know that most of the time men are not mentioned in this discussion of GBV, and I'm glad that you mentioned men and mentioned the fact that they do not want to deal with the stigma and the shame that is associated with them actually experiencing violence from a woman. And that is a very, very huge contributing factor to why a man would not want to report these cases. So we'll go next to Dr. Idiora. Dr. Idiora, who was focusing on some of the medical perspectives related to gender-based violence. So Dr. Idiora, in terms of the implications, the health implications of violence, we've talked about the individual, but what about the overall well-being of families? And could you tell us if in your career, have you witnessed violence cases in your practice, and how do you deal with or handle these issues? What is the impact, the health implications of violence on the overall well-being of families, and whether you have witnessed any violence cases in your practice, and how do you deal with or handle those issues? Thank you, Dr. Idiora.
Okay, thank you once again, Dr. Ann. Health implications of violence are just many. First of all, you will have mental illness. And when you are mentally ill, you are at risk of getting depression. There is anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder. And such kind of a woman will not be able to raise children. When we are depressed, you will reach to an extent of not even eating, and this will lead to death. And again, your social functioning is extremely very poor, and then this will lead you to self-isolation. And of course, self-isolation, it's not healthy. Now, when we come to a woman who is pregnant or have children, with self-isolation, it can even lead to death of the family due to neglect or injury. And even to the extent of the woman can decide to kill the children. This is homicide. or even commit suicide. So now this is an extent to which this gender-based violence can lead to. And again, economically, it is not even wise, because again, a depressed, like if there is violence at home, I have these injuries, will I even be able to go to work? I will not be able to go to work. And this is actually a loss to the economy. And I think at some point, even the world loses a lot of money because of gender-based violence, because people skip their work and they don't go there, and there is low productivity and low income to the country as a whole, leave alone the individual or the family. There will be no income actually coming to the family. And at your place of work, your work is already stagnant. Now, when coming to my career, I always think I wasn't taught in medical school about gender-based violence. And whenever there are cases of gender-based violence, the obstetricians are the first to be called to come and review and give a statement and fill the police form. Then we just fill what is there. What you have seen is what you transfer to the form, because it's actually a police case. Like most of my colleagues here have mentioned, it's not only to the low socioeconomic classes. Gender-based violence is overall. It cuts across the board. Now, like in my career, if somebody comes and you see, she will tell you, I've fallen in the bathroom. I slipped in the bathroom and I fell down. How did you fall down? On my tummy. And in your mind, it is impossible for someone to fall, sleep in the bathroom and fall on the tummy. So when you are trying to ask and get out, if that person actually insists that I fell in the bathroom, and most of the time they are being accompanied by the culprit, the men come with them and they are just there looking at them, what they are telling the doctor. So sometimes when I get irritated, I tell them, kindly just leave me to examine my patient, go out a little. Then when the man leaves, then is when the lady can actually tell you that I was beaten. Then you get exactly how she was beaten. Are you going to open a case? Do we fill the police form? And now she's the one there telling you, no, it's okay. Because I have to go back there. Now with this baby, where will I go? You see, so if you are economically disempowered, you are not going anywhere. So you have to go there to that same person to take care of you. So I think women are suffering. At some point, actually, I can get patients who come. They are not pregnant, but they have been raped, maybe by the intimate partner, with all injuries you could see. But now when you ask, and they insist to you that it was consensual sex. So there is nothing you can do, because said, yeah, I gave a consent. And you are seeing clearly this is something which was not consensual. So what I can say to women have to be empowered to speak it out. But again, most of the time they can't speak it out because they are still dependent. So I think it's a bit of a complex thing. Thank you, Anne.
Thank you so much, Dr. Idiora. I think you've mentioned something the Honorable had mentioned about economic empowerment basically being a fundamental sort of foundation to ensure that women are protected against gender-based violence. Because if you're not economically empowered and this individual who is abusing you is the only person who can help you financially, then you don't really have much of a choice but to go back there. So if we educate our women and we empower our women financially, then we may be able to protect many of them from staying in those places where they experience a lot of gender-based violence. On the note of, I think Ms. Edith had talked a little about why women are unable to report to the police because sometimes they don't get the reception they expected. Maulana, the next question goes for you. I know that recently we saw there was a launch for a GBV court in Juba, and I think that is very good progress. And we'd like to know, are police investigators, prosecutors, and judges trained in South Sudan to interview women who are victims of gender-based violence in a respectful and appropriate manner? And why is it that women seem to get harassed and mistreated by law enforcement, even though they might be victims? And maybe you can just tell us what are the positive things we can expect from this GBV court that has recently been launched in Juba. So are these people trained, the law enforcement officers and the judges? And why is it that women get very harassed and mistreated by law enforcement when they report this case?
Great. I mean, first of all, we have to realize that the police service in South Sudan is among the most under-resourced public sectors in South Sudan, in terms of both capacity and also resources. So this has a huge bearing in how police officers and members of the law enforcement can deal with crimes in general. So when you then come to the specific crimes of sexual violence against women and girls, I will, I know that over the last couple of years since, 2005 in the separation period of South Sudan from Sudan, there have been several trainings offered by the United Nations, by several human rights organizations. So we would have to actually look at the broad range of trainings that have been provided to what segments of police officers and in what areas of South Sudan in order to be able to adequately respond to a question on whether they are sufficiently trained and how they are then applying this training. But I would say in general, there is a huge gap. Both in training as well as how police officers respond to crimes of sexual violence. I mean, one of the biggest reasons and one of the biggest challenges is the stigma associated with sexual violence. It's huge when it comes to women and girls, and it's even much worse when it comes to men and boys, such that men and boys rarely come forward to report issues of sexual and gender-based violence. This has even been more compounded by the conflict the conflict that has run in our country over the last couple of years, such that whatever gains were made between 2005 and 2013 have been squandered and reversed by the conflicts that has engulfed the country over the last couple of years. So I think there is so much more that needs to be done with regard to investigation and prosecution of crimes of sexual violence. So it will not only have to be about the training element, but about this huge elephant in the room that we have spoken about, which is really customary law and in its place in how it deals with issues of a personal nature, which include, issues around marriage. We know that for instance, when a girl is raped in South Sudan, the natural response of most families is to, one, hide that shame and stigma, or restore family or communal relations by encouraging a marriage. And then that marriage then leads into more abuse after that. But then what you find is that questions around marriage, divorce, inheritance, child custody, all these are supposed to be dealt with by customary law. And as so many panelists have already mentioned and discussed, is that customary law does not favor women and girls, and it does not even, much so, it does not even favor younger women and girls, let's just say children in general. So there's a huge problem there. When we talk about the SGBV court, the Sexual Gender-Based Violence Court that has been established recently. So discussions around this started, I think, in 2019 when the Chief Justice issued a circular around the establishment of this court. And, straight from the get-go, I think there were issues around where this court will sit. So the fact that it took, more than a year for this court to become a reality. I mean, first of all, let me just say that it is a huge step, and it is very important that there is a specialized court that can deal with issues of sexual and gender-based violence against women and girls. And I also understand it's supposed to deal with juvenile cases. I believe it's juvenile delinquency in general, not just juvenile in terms of sexual and gender-based violence. But we will need to see what is the capacity that this court has. What is the capacity of the bench of judges that are going to sit in this court? What kind of training are they being offered? What kind of outreach is going to be available? Because if the court is sitting in Juba, is the plan to then to ensure that there's a specifics or similar courts in all the 10 states, and beyond that into the counties, into the Payams? How do we ensure that the justice being delivered by such a court trickles down? But even absent of these specialized courts in states and in counties, how is the High Court dealing with cases of sexual and gender-based violence? And how are these commensurate then with this court that will be sitting in Juba? So, I mean, I think it's a very significant step. It is very important, but there will need to be a lot of capacity building around this court. There will need to be a lot of sensitization in general. One, you know, we already have a problem with sensitizing victims of sexual and gender-based violence on how to access services, because this is, you know, justice has to be holistic. Justice is not Justice is not only seeing the perpetrator behind bars. Justice is also what does the victim, what does the survivor receive? What mental health services are they getting? What medical services are they getting? What communal support and also support from the state are these people getting? There's also the bigger problem around conflict-related sexual violence. Remember, this court in Juba, this GBV court, is not going to be dealing with cases that have rape, kidnapping, abduction, mutilation cases that have been committed by members of the armed forces or armed opposition groups in the context of fighting. And we all know there have been, you know, there's an overwhelming number of cases that have been committed over the last couple of years. So this court is not going to be dealing with those kind of cases. So what is then, then what is the answer to dealing with cases of conflict-related sexual violence? And how then can the government ensure that there is justice and there are reparations for cases around sexual and gender-based violence committed in the conflicts?
Oh, I think that's a very, very important questions that you have posed there, and I think I'm quite disappointed that this court is not going to deal with perpetrations that are committed by the armed forces, because for most of the cases that we have had or that have come to light, the armed forces have been blamed for it, and therefore, if we are going to exclude them from actually being brought to this court and penalized, then I think this is something that has to be looked into. And the fact that you've mentioned that we do not know how these services provided by this court are going to trickle down to the county level, to the Payam level. I like the way Honorable Pia had talked about the referral system in Yambio, specifically for GBV. And the law and the court system should have a similar thing where cases are dealt with at the very level of the community and then taken up forward all the way to the High Court or to the Sexual and Gender-Based Violence Court. So thank you so much for those questions that you've posed, Maulana, and I hope that there are people who are watching and are taking that into account and noting that down and trying to figure out how they're going to do this to make sure that the services reach the people. Now, this question goes out to any panelist who would like to answer this. One of our audience has asked, what support do we have for victims of violence in South Sudan? Are they offered free to all the people who need it? And are there any follow-up treatment? I don't know, Miss Editha, do you think that is something you can answer in view of the fact that you have your organization has been able to deal with a few victims of gender-based violence? What support is there in South Sudan? And are these services free of charge?
Thank you for that. The support that given to the GBV survivors in the hospital is when the person is raped, then she will be given the medicine that before 72 hours. That is, but there's nothing support for these GDP survivors.
Can I?
Thank you, Ms. Editha. Honorable Pierre Philippe, you'd like to also contribute to that question? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think we had some support. Number one is, of course, the medical support that they get. And then there is a center. We had a center in Yambio, what we call a child transit center, where victims of rape, when we get, because we had our social workers out there, when there is a victim of rape, we bring them to the center for rehabilitation to get some trauma healing, some counseling, and some of them, you know, at a stage that they cannot even take care of themselves, they are out of their mind. So we do rehabilitation, we do medical services, they go for complete check and tests, and they are given some medical attention. And then we also try to take them back to their community. First of all, if it is the husband, we call him for a conversation with our social workers to explain to him the challenges and how this would affect his family. If it is a girl, a school girl who is raped, we also bring her to the center, or who is sold out or married by force. We bring the parents, we bring the headman, we have a conversation. In some cases, the parents of the children were able to receive back, to return the money, like they have married a girl off. But when we call these parents and sit down and have a conversation at our center, they were able to return back the money. And they say, you know, we did not know. And if a man has been beating his wife so much on some issues, after the maybe 2-3 weeks that she's in the center given proper services, then we call the man and the man can accept her back. And so these are some of the services that we are doing. I think there is need to have a center where the GBV victims come. There is need to have those referral pathway, the law, in police, also in medical centers, and to have a center out of that so that they have attention and they are given attention in these areas. So these are some of the support we used to do in Western Equatoria.
Thank you, Honorable Pierre. I think the rest of the country can borrow a leaf from Western Equatoria, because you seem to have established some clear pathways to deal with gender-based violence, and the creation of centers is definitely important that looks into all the aspects that are related to sexual and gender-based violence, the medical aspects, the law aspects, the reporting system, and the mental and psychological counseling that needs to be done, and also the reaching out to the families and the community. I think that is very important. Now, to throw a spanner in the works before I go to Dr. Jen Abucha, Honorable Pierre Philippe, this question is for you from the audience, from Thabo Arop, and what she's asking is that she's actually saying, thank you for sharing your expertise. The question for you is, can you tell us why men who are highly educated and are very much aware of gender-based violence abuse their wives in our communities? I think that is a very loaded question. I hope you'll be able to answer it, Honorable. Yeah.
Yeah, the reason is one, the upbringing. You know, the community where we come from, we learned it from our parents, for example. And number two, the idea that, you know, you can take a cow to drink water, but they might not drink. We pretend to be educated, but sometimes, you know, education, as someone said, it's not about the papers we have. It's not about being in the US, being in the UK. It's about translating what you have learned into your daily experience and contextualizing that to a community where you are. So some of the men, actually, my answer is, some of the men you see who are educated, they are not. They just went to school. So because the education is not within them, they only have papers. They have degrees and masters and so on, but they are still yet to be learned. And they learn, they pretend to know. They think education is getting a good job, having a master's degree, putting on well, building a good house. I can tell you some of those good houses, I'm told, there is not much peace there. And I was surprised also to hear from one of our panelists that in the US, you know, because some people go to the US from that background. I mean, being in US or in the UK will not change them, I believe. So why those men who pretend to be educated behave the same is they have not detached, they have not defined their education. So they are still living in the past, in the community, in the tradition where they came from.
Yes, I agree with you totally, Honorable Pia, that education is not about going to school and getting a certificate that you can say, oh, I attained a master's. It's about a change of thinking and a change of behavior. And our upbringing and socialization has a lot that it contributes to how we behave towards other people. And education should actually transform you, not just give you a paper that you can show other people. And I like what you had mentioned some other time before in the first conversation, that when it comes to gender-based violence, it's not a one-stop solution. It's something that has to keep being emphasized over time. It's like the way a river goes through the riverbed and breaks down the rocks to create a path for itself. This is something that has to be emphasized time and time again until people's thinking and people's behavior is changed. Thank you for that. Now, we'll go back to Dr. Jen Abucha, who is currently in the US that Honorable Pia was talking about. Thank you so much for coming back, and thank you for wearing orange, which is the theme for the current discussion we're having. We've already talked about culture and how it contributes to gender-based violence. Dr. Idiora has mentioned a bit about the medical implications of violence in our community. So we won't go into that. We'll just jump straight on to a question about justice. Maulana has talked a little bit about what the systems are in South Sudan. But how about tell us about the diaspora? What justice system is in place for survivors of gender-based violence in the diaspora? And are there services that include psychological, counseling, and economic support? And do we have a similar customary law system? Because of course we are from Africa, so that might be replicated there. Is there something similar in the US? Thank you.
I would tell you that. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Dr. Jen. Thank you.
Justice is not something that is given. Justice is something that you seek. So gender-based violence is something that can be recognized, can be noticed, can be seen, can be observed, can be assessed and evaluated. But unless the person who is being abused, who is being affected in that situation, gives a consent to it, that's the core point where it boils to in the United States or in the Western world. Even if I'm being tortured, if I do not give consent that this is what I want, you will not get it. And because of the culture that our people are living in, it doesn't matter how much protection you have. It doesn't matter how much money you have. But if the people don't come out and seek for it, it's not helpful. We have seen last year a woman drove with her 4 children or 3 children into the water. We have seen our girls and our boys shooting each other with guns because something is going on. This year, 2020, during the COVID, we have had a lot of sexual harassment and gender-based violence attached to that sexual harassment here into the United States, in our own Equatorial community. And when these girls brought this issue up, our own men attacked them into the Equatorial Forum. They were attacked in the Equatorial Forum. So you can see that the mentality is not about people who are not educated. It's about people who know what is right and wrong. But the ego, the cultural ego of the men feeling superior, that whatever they do should not be touched, is the problem. Until we start to recognize that in our own children. For example, if a man is able to see that his children, his daughter, is being violated like that, and he values his daughter, he will start to put emphasis into that, and that would turn out a positive thing for the community. But other than that, my brother Pierre said something very nice, that the men in diaspora are living in hell. Actually, the women in diaspora are living in hell. The men, especially South Sudanese men, I will tell you, 60% of them are lazy, sleeping in the house, drinking. They cannot cook, they cannot clean, they cannot take their kids to games. They are basically useless. And you cannot have a man inside the house just for sex. It's not even working. That alone, you can get it on the street. You don't need a man to be in the house to tell you what to do just because of sex. So that is kind of something, that baggage that we threw out a long time ago, that's thrown out. The thing is, if marriage is suffering because of any issue, economic, gender violence, domestic violence, anything, the family, that man and his wife is what we call the unit of the family, should be able to sit down and resolve that problem. And if they can't, they have their pastor, they have their family doctor that they can go and seek counseling. The ego of the South Sudanese men do not allow counseling. A woman who is married for 1, 2, 3 years cannot have a child, cannot get pregnant. The man doesn't go.
So thank you, Dr.
This
Jen.
turns into a gender-based violence. You're now targeted because you're a woman. You're not targeted because you're a wife in this relationship, but you're now targeted because you're a woman. Because if he had married a man, there was no way he's going to target that man.
Honorable Pia, could you please respond to some of the things Dr. Jen is saying before we have an explosion here and things fall apart? So please respond, and then we will go to Miss Editha. Dr. Jen, Honorable Pia is going to respond to some of the things that you mentioned.
Yeah, you know, I think one dilemma or illusion among our men, our people, our young people in Africa, is that when you go to the US, it is milk and honey. I've come to the US many times, many cities. I've gone to the UK, many cities. But money is not collected under the tree. And I can tell you, it's not easy. And, you know, I have seen it. I've tested it a little bit. It's not easy. But I think people thought from the refugee camps or those who sought green cards, they had, it is an illusion. And when they come to reality, these things manifest itself. So, and then it reflects into gender-based violence. And if you trace this, really, you will see that it is going back to customs and upbringing of children. For example, in South Sudan, girls are raped. You parent, where did your girl go at what time? How do you encourage your girl? Do you expose her? Do you want to send her at 6 o'clock to go to the market? We were not brought up that way. Sometimes we create this platform for our children to actually be abused. At what age would you want your girl, in our context, to have a smartphone? At what age? In primary 5, primary 8? Is it okay for her to have a smartphone? How does she dress? We are still in I have seen many countries like China, like India. People believe in their custom. There are some positive things. How did she dress when she was going out for a birthday party? To which house? Who are her friends? Can she go anytime?
I think that is just so much burden on the girl. Why don't we teach the boys to keep their hands to themselves?
Exactly. That's what I'm coming to. Even your boy, should he watch football every time? I can tell you these things work. In my house, my children, the boys, I said, I don't want to see your underwear. Period. You don't have a belt, I will buy it for you. My girls, you have to dress decent. There are things you have to do. Because some research, some people said, some children or big people, I don't know whether it is true, do not even know how to cook. You know what? Because the auntie is the one cooking, she's the one washing. And then when they go to marriage, it's a different scenario. In our context, the man would want the wife to cook, but she doesn't know how to cook because she was the daughter of a big man. And so maybe she's not marrying a big man. So it is a number of issues, really. And for us to change this mindset, I can tell you, we need to call on our partners, communities, even our law enforcement. I can tell you that I've been getting the training, but I think we need to do more supervision. And again, we need a robust, my belief is, unless we have a robust engagement in gender-based violence, people talking about this, partners coming with the resources, are not doing pilot projects. This does not need a pilot project anyway. This needs, because it is, you want to change the attitude of the people, how they have been for centuries. You need a collective and engaging, sustainable engagement.
Until you empower the women, then they will be able to admit that there is gender violence in the home, that they can leave and they will be okay. Otherwise, you leave this man, he's going to threaten your family, he's going to threaten you. The line doesn't end, and your kids are taken away, and the line doesn't end. These women are afraid.
I think,
and not only those.
Dr. Jen, thank you so much. I think it's very good that we are having this very honest, open discussion, and we're having both sides of the divide also telling each other. It's good that Honorable Pierre Philip, that you're on this panel today, because now we are telling you our issues as women and how we feel overburdened by this responsibility of, oh, you have to dress decently. Oh, what did you do? Oh, what time of the night were you out there? I think both of you have actually indicated that it starts in the family. It starts in the family, where we tell our children, both our boys and girls, that it is their responsibility to protect each other, to protect their sisters, to protect their brothers from this kind of violence. And that we need partnerships all over, through and through, with every institution, to make sure that this is brought to the ground and that things are changed from within the family unit. It's very important to mention that. And Dr. Jen, you're very right. Economic empowerment is actually the way to go. But as you said before, justice is not given. It is taken. It is taken. And if you do not know how to take your justice for yourself, then it's very difficult for you to attain justice. And I think Ms. Nyagua will agree with me there, Maulana will agree with me. It's not given. Justice is taken. So, yeah, that was a very heated conversation. So we will go to now Miss Editha Meling. Miss Editha, you break the ice for us and tell us a bit about your organization and the role that it plays in supporting survivors of gender-based violence, and what the most common forms of gender-based violence that are reported at your center, and what services you offer as an organization to women who have experienced gender-based violence. This is for the benefit of the women in Juba who might need access to these services. Ms. Editha, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ann. National Women Empowerment and Rehabilitation Organization, NUERO, is a women-led organization which was established in 2010. NUERO has many activities, but I will mention those we are talking of it now. In peace building, we have my battery is getting low, and I don't know where the ICT is.
Miss Editha, just continue with the conversation. I'm sure Aisha will be able to give Robert a call to assist you
Okay.
with that. Continue.
We have a project of peace building, strengthening the young women participation in local and national peace process in South Sudan, which we have trained 40 young girls on peace building, which they are now carrying out the activities of solving a small conflict in their respective community. And we have, we train 50 young women on peace mediation, and also they are now taking the role of mediating the small conflict in their respective community. These girls were drawn from the 10 states of South Sudan, and they are now in the field. And within these girls, we have the mentorship programs for them with the older women who participate in peace negotiation in South Sudan. We have a program as Nuero. We are supporting women living with HIV/AIDS in women in economic empowerment, like small entrepreneurship, which was we give them small management for their businesses. And these women living with HIV/AIDS, some of them are the victims of GVV survivors and the dropout school girls. Concerning the GVV, we do awareness raising in 2 locations because of the shortage of the fund. We do awareness raising on the adolescent girls and young women in 2 locations of Juba, which is Kokuri, Jezira 1, and then Lologo 1, which we have carried out the awareness, and then we have the counseling section to the survivors, and then referral pathway. In this survivors of GVV and then HIV/AIDS, we form the network of young girls, adolescents in these 2 locations, and we train them on usable sanitary pads, and we are now carrying out the dialogue between the boys and the young girls in Lologo and Kokuri. Why this one? Because many cases are raised that the young girls now, they form their groups. They are called fire girls, fire ladies, who they are part of the taking these young girls to the refuge. So we bring them, and then we bring the mothers, and then we bring the fathers, so that they will have dialogue. What did they have to do? And the second thing which is coming is now we have a radio talk source with them. They went there to talk for themselves what is facing them in the community. This is what Nuera is doing for the short time. But we also we have awareness GVV network in Maridi, which was formed. If you hear last 2 months that the young girls who tried to come to Juba and they were caught on the way and then were taken back to the police. Before the parents come, so that they will hand those girls to the parents. At night, the police raped the girls. So we followed that case until now. The case, the police were tried for 5 years in prison, and they are terminated from their work. So the coming activities, we continue with the awareness raising on the community, and we are planning to go to Maridi in January. Thank you for this small that Mero is doing.
Thank you so much, Ms. Editha. You're doing a phenomenal job. I love everything that you mentioned, the creation of support groups, the economic empowerment you're doing for girls, including providing them with sanitary towels that they can make themselves, the dialogue discussions that you're having, the awareness raising. I mean, you're hitting this issue from all sides, including even by using the media to talk about this and create awareness. It's phenomenal what you're doing, Ms. Editha, and we wish you all the best, and we will support you any way we can. Now, before we go back to Honorable Pia, I will ask Dr. Idiora if you can please come back on screen to just mention some of the roles that healthcare workers, including doctors, can play in reporting and preventing gender-based violence. And then Ms. Nyagua can talk about the role of lawyers and judges in the same. So, Dr. Idiora, what roles can healthcare workers, including doctors, play in reporting and preventing gender-based violence?
I think, like Dr. Jane has just mentioned, you have to report it yourself, because I can't force you to report. Actually, if you come to me as a doctor, I will just treat the symptoms that you have, but I will not be in a position to raise it to the authority that that person was like abused. So the role we play is treatment, and we fill the form the correct way, the police form, in case you have the police form to be filled. And Dr. Jane has also mentioned something like when it comes to fertility, personally, if I have a couple seeking a fertility issue, if the woman comes alone, I always ask the first visit, I need to see the men. So they have to come together. So I think this is also the role that I play as a gynecologist in that part, because I actually insist I need to see the man before we start, because I have to talk to both of you and counsel both of you. You know, the woman is coming now seeking that medical attention out of frustration. So sometimes when you get both of them, you will notice there is actually violence in that house, and that is what is affecting the woman not getting pregnant. It's not actually a medical problem, but it is the psychological issues, the psychological trauma that the woman is going through that makes her not able to get pregnant. But when you call both partners and you talk to them, when you have already spoken to the woman alone, when you call the man, you speak to the man alone, then you talk to them, both of them. And now I have so far achieved, although not in South Sudan, but I've achieved good outcomes from such couple, because you give them counseling. This is now how relationship is. Getting babies is from both, not only one side. So but in our African society in general, the woman is to blame. And now this one, you will find like everyone in that family now targeting the woman. So you become a soft target for everyone in that family. I just want to give a brief story. That was in 2005 when I was working in Tori. I was called late in the evening, like at 7. I come and examine. There is a lady who was a young girl who was raped, like at the riverside. So we went to the police station. When we reached the police station, I found the police officer was nagging at the girl. And why did you go there? What are you looking for? So it becomes the girl's problem instead of, and he was not even considering that girl was traumatized. So now I turned into him and I started shouting at him. Have you brought her here to shout at her? And why did you guys call me? Now this girl needs support. I'm taking her to the hospital. So, and the girl was already in the police cell because the family brought the girl to the police cell because the girl was raped. So we just have like a system which is not in order. The female gender is always to blame. And when I reached that police station, when I was asking, where are the boys? They were not there. So I think our society is just a patriarchal society who believes the man is always right.
I think now, as a follow-up, Dr. Idiora, I think you have touched a nerve. I can see Honorable Pia shaking his head vigorously, and I think he's about to give us a dose of what he thinks from a male perspective. But even as he thinks up that answer, three questions for him, and he'll also respond to you. Honorable Pia, why do you think gender-based violence should be eliminated in our communities? What roles should men play and why? And I can see Dr. Idiora has touched on that a bit. And do we need male champions to eliminate GBV? Now, from the audience, they are asking if you can please address polygamy and whether you think it does also contribute to GBV in our communities. So you can answer Dr. Idiora about our patriarchal society that is propagating this culture of gender-based violence, and the need for men to play a role in this discussion, and why we need male champions, and how we can eliminate gender-based violence from our communities, and the role that polygamy plays. I think that's something people want to hear from a male perspective.
Okay, now I think starting with Doctor, I think I will agree with her that our society is structured in that manner. And as I always want to say that, it is again about community perspective. But I can tell you that not all men think that way. I don't think that way in my home because of my exposure. But some people in the villages or in the other parts who do not give these ideas a platform to sink into them and look their importance, they will take it that way, that a man is a champion and what he decides is final. On the issue of polygamy, just in the interest of time, I think I'll just touch on quickly. That does polygamy lead to GBV? I think a forced polygamy would lead to GBV. What do I mean? If you are staying home with your wife or with your husband, and the husband just brings another wife, for what reason? If you are producing children, you have children with your husband, you feel you are okay, there are no issues. And then, of course, the wife will feel, then why am I in this house? And if there are conditions that leads to another wife, and the man sits down with his wife and have a conversation, we also have the same case with men. There are women who are in those homes where a man cannot perform his sexual activity at home due to sickness or so. In some communities, I've seen some men who can even hang themselves because the wife will say, I cannot stay with you, unfortunately, any longer because I'm not your sister. You did not bring me to be a sister in this house. Especially in communities where you find elderly men getting married to young girls in such a community. So I think polygamy would lead to some GBV depending on how you handle it. What was the reason? And was there any conversation, or a man just sneaks out or something like that? That's what I can say in brief. But about why do we think GBV should be eliminated? Surely. I think one of the things that has taken South Sudan the way we are all very stiff every time. When you are out there, you come to South Sudan, people are just like, why are you touching me? So we are all traumatized because we believe a child, when you are born, a child is empty slate, they gain experiences. Our community, our society where we have grown from, and somebody was telling me, and history justifies that South Sudan, we were like part of a slavery type of thing from the north, where the language we learned was get up, sit down, go there, come here. See, the Arabic language we speak in Juba is of that nature. Everything is forced. Itamala, tenite, gumfo, agoti, Arab, no retasa. I would slap you now. So when you come to South Sudan, this is the environment. Even a taxi to take you, come quickly. Brother, I'm giving you money. Treat me well. You go to a restaurant, you want to eat, what do you want? So it is that language. So, and this comes from really our upbringing. If you go to Uganda, even in a bar, people will greet you in a good manner. You are welcome. Come home. Even when we go to our homes, our wives, you know, there is no welcome. It's like, okay, you are here in the morning, thanks be to God, you are back. But in some communities, when you get home, you are received. You are welcome. How was work today? You know, you feel at home. Gender-based violence actually is the next generation. If we don't do away with it in our community, whether in police, whether our society will go to the left. It's not an easy thing, because what the children learn from us is what they will be. You can only be the product of your family. You cannot be the product. A child exactly exhibits where they come from. Some communities in South Sudan, you can see that, yes, this community, this guy, where he comes from, is coming from a violent home. And they will just do that. And I like what somebody said, that if you want to marry a man, you try to study about his father, the home where they were. For us teachers, a child, we know the children, when they come to school, they're all, the languages they give, how they talk to each other, you will just know. So there is every reason to eliminate gender-based violence. Men can play a better role because of the way our community is structured, that a man is a superior gender. But men will not play their role if there are no people like yourself who stand up for your community and say enough is enough today. If we are only doing piecemeal of these things, no, we need to sit men down, let them be in the lead, and we can have the change that we need. They are men champions, actually, of GBV, those who have believed in it, and those who are thinking of better future for the community, for themselves. And I could be one of that male champion, actually, and I have always believed myself. And I try to practice that from my home, with my children, with my wife. So it has to start there. But I would like women of South Sudan to come up with something to transform your communities. And I like the point that empowerment of women, maybe later time will be, I will talk about what we did that changed our community and how it is working and what can be done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Pia. I know that you're carrying the burden for the male species on this current discussion. I'm sorry, all the questions, all the issues will be directed to you, so you might end up answering a few more questions than the rest of the panelists. I think Dr. Jen has been nodding, shaking her head during that whole conversation that you were having. And Dr. Jen, this is out of what questions we were supposed to ask you, but could you please just tell us a few things as if you're speaking to the people we expect to be the male champions. If you were to speak to them today, what would you tell them? What do we want from them as the male champions for these gender issues?
Well, let me start by a small story. Between 2010 and 2011, we, the community, the women in Arizona and California, San Diego and LA, we sat down because we had had many years with no children delivered in our community. So we sat down to see, why is this happening that we have no new children? So the women Equatorial women in Arizona, more than 40 plus women, the women in California, we all came and sat down in Arizona to sort this out. Why is this happening? We found out there was a lot of miscommunication in the home, a lot of misunderstanding. The man either works at night, the woman works during the day, gender roles, taking care of children, anxiety was very high, depression was very high, tensions were very high. We found out a solution how to cool that, starting from teaching the women when to come back from work, How do they dress? When to put the kids to bed? What kind of night dresses you need? How to talk to the men? How not to put the bills next to the door so that when they arrive home and the first thing they see is the bill, they leave. They put the key on the door and they're gone and they don't come back. The following year in Arizona alone, in the city of Phoenix, we had 11 children born.
Okay, great. Dr. Jen, we're running out of time.
So why am I saying this? Why am I saying this? If we put our minds to find a solution to something, we can find it. And for people who are in this state, I will say that if you're facing gender-based violence, you're facing domestic violence. I used to be part of the state, and the people here know me. We have Victory House, we have Faith House, we have different houses on Dunlap, on Olive, and at the state, and including Home on Bad, for women who are facing domestic violence and for men who are facing gender-based violence, as well as women. There is resources out there. You can get food, you can get a shelter, you can get resources for your children. There is no need to be bitter and struggling in that situation. You can get out and get help. Sometimes that person who is even having that violence has no idea that something is going on. It may be one way or another of finding help for that person to even transform from where they are. So gender-based violence is not always a bad thing. Sometimes it is a sign that there is a mental condition going on in the family, and that person doing that thing is actually begging for help. And if you recognize and report that, that person can actually get help, and your family can improve as a whole. So it's not a one-way thing. It's not only for women, it's not only for men. As I said, as long as you don't report it, it can go so long and people can suffer, the children can become victims in it. But if it is taken care of in a good way, the family benefits, the community benefits, and everybody wins.
Thank you, Dr. Jane. Thank you for that. Because we're running out of time now, I think we will move on to basically some of the challenges and recommendations. If we can keep our final notes to 2 minutes or less. But Maulana, I'll give you a few more minutes, about 3 to 4 minutes, because there's some questions that I would like you to answer. First, on the role that the lawyers, judges, and prosecutors will play in preventing and supporting women who are survivors, and the steps that South Sudan should take to ensure justice and reparation for women and girls in South Sudan. And maybe you can give us some of the challenges and recommendations moving forward. So for you, I'll give you 3 minutes because you're answering quite a number of questions, and you will be the one to start with the recommendations as we move around to other people. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, I must say this is quite a very important and engaging discussion. It's sad that it needs to come to an end. I'm also glad that Dr. Jane, talked about resources available to survivors of sexual and gender-based violence in the US. I mean, I know that a lot of people who are watching and listening might be triggered by this conversation. And I hope that, people who know of services will be able to refer others to available services. I know that in Juba, there's the One Stop Center, and there are various women-led organizations that provide counseling and other services. And I hope those who are listening and need those kinds of services are there. And as a sister as well, who's also on Facebook, I mean, please just send me a message if you need to talk to somebody or if you need any sort of guidance. I'm happy to help. So on the broad range of issues, I kind of lost track of those questions again. Yes, so what does South Sudan need to do? Was it to provide reparations for women and Oh, okay. So there was a question about what investigators and prosecutors and stakeholders within the justice system can do in South Sudan. I mean, I think it's more about how these cases are handled at the judicial level. at the court level. I mean, everything starts with what laws exist and what laws are in place. So what needs to be changed, what needs to be amended, what needs to be better implemented. And I know there are various women-led organizations and UN organizations that are working on law reforms. I mean, in particular, for instance, the issue around child marriage, it's so pervasive. We see it every day on social media. We see it every day in our homes. We see it being reported by the media. But it's very rare. And even where government officials themselves are engaged in this practice, it's very rare to even see the government step up to protect the underage girls that are being married off to some of these government officials. And so in a way, the government is failing in its duty of care and even enhancing this practice from the top level going downwards. And I also think, you know, that prosecutors and judges, as well as even police and law enforcement officials, need to prioritize how they, one, investigate, prosecute, as well as ensure justice and services for some of these crimes of sexual and gender-based violence. I know, was it in Torit a couple of years ago that there was a judge who took an initiative to outlaw the practice of girl-child compensation for homicide. So it really starts with 1, 2, 3 actors taking a step against a practice that is redundant, a practice that is harmful, and a practice that is illegal. Now, when it comes to the question of reparations, I believe, reparations and justice, I mean, I think we've already talked about what steps. The beauty about this conversation is we've been able to underline and point out various things that we need to work on. So one, I feel that this issue of a discussion, of a dialogue, of a conversation, it needs to be an intergenerational conversation around this issue of sexual and gender-based violence. It also needs to be a conversation, although we've said that people in Juba and, you know, educated people understand this, there is still a need to properly sensitize ourselves and even address this issue. Because I even know, you know, one of my male colleagues, a lawyer whose father got married to a 16-year-old recently. And I said, surely you're a lawyer and an activist. Why is this happening in your own home? So it really starts with us taking a step and us having a dialogue and a conversation of what needs to be changed, both in our homes and in our societies. It is not an easy conversation, but it needs to start, and we need to interrogate where we have to head. So in terms of reparations, as well as justice, so it is a gradual step, but things need to happen now. Issues around the gender-based violence courts. How is it going to be resourced? Those judges who are going to be sitting there, are they sensitized on matters of law, on matters of practice, on matters of evidence? So that needs to take place. How do we translating these decisions being taken by the courts into actual action on the ground and changes on the ground in our communities themselves? There's also conflict-related sexual violence that is underreported, as well as, you know, normalized, and which has not been addressed. So, you know, we need to, one, there's the very big elephant in the room, such that we have a new government that is being led by individuals who had command responsibility during the war, people who set out their forces to commit war crimes and crimes against humanity, you know, acts of sexual violence in conflict. So this accountability needs to start from the top, actually. It needs to start from senior government level and military leaders. And, you know, so I have long campaigned for the hybrid court on South Sudan. And I think it is just one of the ways that we can ensure justice for victims, but also more so reparations. I mean, Chapter 3 of the Peace Agreement talks about reconstruction. I mean, we're still stuck in Chapter 1, but Chapter 3 of the Peace Agreement talks about reconstruction. And part of the reconstruction agenda, there's supposed to be a special fund put in place for people who've been affected by the war, IDP women and children. So this these provisions in the peace deal could be used in order to provide medical services as well as other kinds of services for survivors, not only of sexual and gender-based violence, but of the broad range of abuses that have taken place in the conflicts. Certainly not just women and children and girls, but it is a broad range of people in society. Yeah, so I have to drop off, unfortunately, but thank you so much, everybody who sat on this panel. And again, for those who are listening, if you want to reach out to me, you have a sister to talk to on these issues. I am happy to just
thank you.
talk.
We'll go to Dr. Idiora. If you can just give us some conclusion and recommendations as in the interest of time, so that we can wrap up the conversation. Dr. Idiora.
Okay, thank you once again. I think we have all spoken, and I just want to add up my voice to what was said by some of the panelists. Gender-based violence is not only one-sided. So I think us as women, what do we contribute to make that the other side so violent and irritated? So sometimes our mouth is the problem. So sometimes when you see somebody is really hiking up, I think the best is for you to calm down or walk away. Not like, I know some of us like insulting, you start insulting, then you get a slap. I think from our side, we should also learn to prevent a slap, because it starts with a slap and then a box and you are gone. So I think us as women, the educated one, let's put an effort to educate the others how to protect themselves. If you can't do that, just run away and seek the authority. I think that will be the best for us to start eradicating gender-based violence. And make sure you seek medical or legal advice. And yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Idiora, for that summary. Miss Editha Melling, if you can give us a few notes on your conclusion and your recommendations. Thank you. Miss Editha? You're on mute, Miss Editha.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for this fruitful discussion. My recommendation is that what we have discussed, let it be in action. Like the lack of funding for the women-led organizations to continue advocating for the elimination of GBV. We talk about the code which was launched 2 days ago. Then the question asked, is the people who are going to work in that code, are they experts? Well, we talk about the training of the police personnel, but sometimes the training goes to not to the people who are working, especially in that section. Like, let me say, the Special Protection Unit of police, which is Special Protection Unit is for women, protecting women and children. But the people who are working there, once it's come for the training, they send the people that they know. They're not the people who are direct working in that place. So we need the expert to be trained so that they will be taking the investigation of the cases of GVV. Thank you for this. My recommendation is that also we are appealing to the donors and our partners to commit it an action to provide fund for the women so that they will be able to carry out the awareness raising and to educate our women in the community with our young children, our young girls. Thank you for this discussion.
Thank you so much, Ms. Editha, for joining us and for the phenomenal work you're doing with the women in South Sudan. We are so grateful for what your organization is doing. The next, we will talk to now Honorable Pia. If you can just give us an overview of the strategies that you used in Western Equatoria and some of the recommendations you may have.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think one of the recommendations to begin with is it's actually a challenge for all of us, especially South Sudanese on this panel, that let us practice what we believe in our communities in whatever smaller way that we can do. One thing we did in Yambio was to work with the churches, because we believe that churches are everywhere. But we also knew that churches, the pastors do not know about GBV. They know how to, the theology. So train them so that they can reach as many people as possible. Train the local chiefs to understand the dangers of SGBV. That's one thing that we should put into practice what we know. Secondly is livelihood for the women. If women are empowered, it reduces GBV. One of the best case we had in Yambia was this woman who formed a group and made a lot of money with support from UN Women. At Christmas, she had a motorcycle. She had to give one to her husband when she bought a new one, because the husband was refusing her to go to the women group that we were supporting with some livelihood startup kits. So when she grew up in business, she bought a new motorbike and gave the old one to her husband. So she was now taking care of the children at home. So if you empower women, they have livelihood, they can make some money, and they sit together and have a discussion, the benefit that the woman is bringing at home, then we can reduce those things. The other thing is creating what I would call a robust referral pathway. This is important for the donors to know, that we should have those stops from the community to the county, to the state, to the national level. That should be even the law enforcement. We should train people who will deal with these issues. The referral pathway is very important. And of course, we can create courts like the court that Maulana was talking about. It's good to create a court, but you don't create a court when people are not aware about the dangers of this thing. So I think the first thing we need to do is like creating a court for cattle wrestling in some parts of South Sudan. Then you will have all the youth in the court, in prison. I think what we first need to do is to tell them the dangers of cattle wrestling before you create a court for anybody who practices that. So my point here is we need to focus really on community awareness and focus on that. And to our women and also men, we need to understand the context, and we need to practice what we believe in from our homes, how we bring up our children. I think these are some of the things that we did in Yambio, and I saw some of them actually working. And I'm sure if you go to Yambio, you will see some difference in terms of these GBV issues. They are not stamped out, but there are some things working out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Pia, for sharing your expertise, experience, and your recommendations. We are so grateful to have had you on this panel. Dr. Jane, conclusion and recommendations. You're welcome.
I really don't know what to say in terms of South Sudan. The experts down there have said a lot of things, including editor has really good program going, and I would like to congratulate you for doing that, because I was in Juba. I was a nurse in Juba before I went to Khartoum, before I left the country. And I have seen it all. My first 3 children, I gave birth to them in Juba, so I know what is going on there. But again, it goes back to the unit, the family, what Honorable Pierre has said, sensitizing the family, sensitizing the community, allowing that awareness to flow within us. And within my own community especially, it's until the men feel that it's touching their own body by touching their own kids, then they will react. So let us take that in this information that we have. It's just too much information. Let's take that, digest it, find out a way how we can have this small talks within the community, not only in Juba town, but within the different rural communities to bring this up, because most of the things are not happening during the daylight. They're happening around there with this big man going around and this big man doing it. So they know what they're doing. And if you get them involved, they may be able to find solutions and help us out instead of us all the time pointing fingers. Gali ita 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 ita. Let's make them part of finding the solution, and it may be a better way of finding a solution, because we know there are women out there that are vulnerable. I cannot be abused by a man, period, but there is another woman that will be abused. I cannot stand it because I will not allow a man to do that to me. But another woman doesn't know how to stand up. Even if she wants to stand up, she doesn't know how to stand up. So we need to recognize that symptoms also. As providers like Dr. Idiora, though there is not much you can do without the people's consent, I would just report it. Like we have mandatory reporting in the US for children and adults, which are seniors. If they come to us with any signs and bruises, we report that automatically. We don't ask anybody else. We report it. The law enforcement will go investigate to their house. If there is nothing, it's nothing. If there is something or something, you've saved a life. But for the other adult group that need to give a consent, there has to be a way that these things can be reported and found. The only challenge is that if you report something, police there are better zolde, perhaps better talabu gurush, but I'll be investigate. And if you better not gurush ma for the you, the person who reported, is now causing this family havoc. So it becomes another challenge. But let's start to look at what we already have with everything we already put together, and let's work from there. But I can tell you that I have seen that in my family, and every one of you have seen that in their family, and we know what it is.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jen. Thank you for joining the discussion and taking time off your work. I know you're completely tired and sleepy, but thank you so much. And as we come to the end of this discussion, I would like to thank all our panelists, Honorable Pierre Philip, Dr. Idiora, Dr. Jen Abucha, Ms. Editha Meling, and Maulana Nyagua for joining this discussion. And I would also like to thank the audience for joining us. Protection of women's rights, especially the protection of gender, from gender-based violence, should be mainstreamed in all aspects of society. And from what we have discussed here, it is our collective responsibility to ensure that this happens. And our nation is a long way from making this a reality. And this is something
Dr. Ann,
to advocate for. Sorry, Dr. Jen, yes?
Somebody has been asking a question here for a long time about the anxiety and anxiety and intense depression caused by more GBV. Maybe you will want to answer that one for that person, or you may want to tell them that you will follow up with that question.
Yes, we will answer that question after the discussion is over. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, and we might drop off at any minute. So for the person who've asked, I'll come back to that question and answer it. And if there's need for another discussion, we will arrange for another discussion. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. And I would like to thank the UN Women for their support, and for Aisha and Robert behind the scenes helping with the technical aspects of this discussion. I would like to remind everyone that tomorrow we will be having our special edition, and we will be discussing the prospects for labor market reforms and addressing issues of youth and women unemployment in South Sudan. We will have the Honorable James Hothmai on the panel with Ms. Angep Akol Dedut, and the time will be at 4 p.m. East African time, and the other time zones are indicated in our forum and on our page. Thank you so much, our panelists, for joining us today. This has been an enlightening conversation, and I hope that there's a lot that people have taken away from this, and we will become advocates against gender-based violence and ensure that our women, our children, and everyone else who is vulnerable, including the men, because as you can see, Honorable Pia has represented them very well, are protected against violence. Thank you so much, panelists, and we look forward to having you on another day in a different discussion. And thank you so much, and have a lovely day and night or afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Jen. Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.